With just 1 week to go until the Christmas break, this is the final opportunity to climb those league tables. Yes, welcome along to this week's Women's Football Chat ahead of the final round of fixtures of 2023. And after what was an interesting weekend of FA Cup action, although it didn't quite go to plan for many FAWNL sides, no real shocks to talk about in the FA Cup this weekend, but plenty of strong efforts from the sides across the 6 divisions. My name is Chris Gadsby. I'm here every Thursday at 6 p.m, bringing you the very latest from the 3rd and 4th tiers of women's football here in England. This is the show that is dedicated to the FAWNL. And lots of FA Cup games to go through, but we're going to start, as we always do, with the league fixtures, and we are going to start with the Northern Premier Division this week. Liverpool Feds 1, Halifax 1. I see both goals coming relatively close together in this game. Liverpool Feds taking the lead through Paige Cole in the 22nd minute, but Courtney Willis just 3 minutes later equalising for Halifax. What that means for the Northern Premier Division table is that Halifax have jumped above Stourbridge with that point. It's the only change in the Northern Premier Division table, but as we near the halfway point of the season, Liverpool Feds the only ones that have reached the halfway point in the games that they have played. And you see they're up in 5th, but Stoke with games in hand could leapfrog them, Derby with games in hand could leapfrog them, and Halifax with games in hand could leapfrog them. So Liverpool Feds could find that when those games in hand have been played, they've dropped down a few places, but it's going to take a while for those games in hand to be played. Halifax then, a point means they are now 6 points clear of the relegation zone, and with still several games in hand, and with a vastly superior goal difference that virtually makes that 6-point gap a 7-point gap. They are now, 3 games clear of the drop, realistically. So some breathing space for Halifax, as I said, with those other games in hand as well, because they've really struggled to get these games on so far this season. It really is a good opportunity for them to pull even further away, and you suspect that they're probably going to be alright this season. That gap, obviously with nobody else playing, is still holding firm at 4 points at the moment for Fylde and Huddersfield to try and get themselves out of that bottom 2, but they are going to need to start, when they get playing again, picking up some points relatively quickly. Right, no games in the Southern Premier Division. Basically everybody was involved in the FA Cup, so there just weren't any games, so no change to the table. We'll move through then into Division 1 Midlands. It doesn't make for great reading there either, let's be honest. Leaford Athletic against Peterborough, postponed. Notts County against Northampton Town, postponed. Lincoln City against Sporting Cowser, postponed. So of course no change to the Division 1 Midlands table from last week's show either, because all the games, particularly the ones that were meant to be played last week, and then they pushed them back by a week trying to get them on and still couldn't get them on. It's not been great for the Division 1 Midlands so far this December, really. Division 1 North then, that was meant to have 3 games played, and even that only managed 1, with Doncaster Rovers Bells beating Chorley by 2-1. Goals in this one coming to Jessica Tugby-Andrew in the 35th minute. Chorley then equalising through Isabel Wade in the 57th minute before Jasmine Saxton put Doncaster back in front in the 73rd minute, and that is how it stayed there. And what that means for the table is that Doncaster Rovers Bells, with those 3 points, go above York City in the table. So they are now in 8th place. They are 6 points away from the relegation zone. They've got a bit of a better goal difference than Chester Street Town by virtue of 4 goals. So it is the 6-point gap. You could argue it's a 7-point gap, particularly with only 1 game in hand. But Doncaster are very, very important 3 points for them against Chorley, who now just sit a point above Doncaster in the table. You are starting to look now that, if Doncaster can get a couple of wins, pull themselves further away, you're looking at perhaps now, is it 2 from those 4 rather than 2 from those 5, or are Doncaster still in that conversation? It's an interesting discussion to have, and one that next week probably we'll be looking at in a bit more detail when there are only results to look at and no fixtures coming up. So that's the Division 1 North. Division 1 South East, also only 1 game. We are racing through it this week, which is somewhat unsurprising given the weather and how everything panned out. But Worthing 4, Cambridge City 0, with Ashford against Chesham United called off. Goals in this one: a hat-trick for Rebecca Bath, 45th plus 2, 57th, 59th, and then 1 for Tierney Scott in the 61st minute. 4-0 the victory for Worthing over Cambridge City in the only game in South East. It means that Worthing are up a couple of places, up to 4th now in Division 1 South East, which is certainly the league that has managed to get games on the best so far in the FAWNL. You look at the games played there, pretty much everybody in double digits, 2 teams halfway through, everybody else just 1 game short, apart from Chesham, who are, yes, only 1 point above the relegation zone, but have 2 games in hand on those teams in the relegation zone. So Worthing up a couple of places after that big victory over Cambridge City. Cambridge City still down in 11th, and nobody else, of course, playing this weekend. So that's the only change in the table. Worthing 8 points away from Wimbledon. They have a game in hand. They're only 5 points away from Norwich, having played the same number of games as Norwich. So certainly not, winning the game in hand and you go to 5 points back from the top of the table. Certainly not out of the question for Worthing, who have got a lot to play for in the second half of the season, particularly with this, of course, being their first season in the FAWNL after promotion last year. AFC Sudbury, the other promoted side, not doing quite so well, but their goal will be completely just to stay in the division for this season. And then Division 1 South West, just one result in Division 1 South West. Bridgewater United beating Chelsea. The season of misery continues for Chelsea. Bridgewater United haven't announced their lineup yet. Nor is it on Twitter, so I haven't got their goal scorers. The only goal scorer I've got is Lucian Sylvester for Chelsea in the 85th minute, getting what would prove to be a consolation goal for them. So what that means in Division 1 South West then is that Bridgewater United have climbed up to 6th with the victory and put themselves far away from the relegation zone now. It's a 9-point gap plus a much better goal difference, so you're talking a 10-point gap really. That will probably do it for Bridgewater United, you suspect, with the points they'll pick up in the rest of the season. So Keynsham Town drop a place with not playing, of course. Chelsea still at the bottom, still only 4 points away though from safety, and with a game in hand over Torquay United. So although it's been a very difficult season for Chelsea, they've lost every single game, their goal difference is at minus 67. It only takes the odd draw and maybe a very lucky win somewhere for Chelsea, and they could find themselves suddenly in a position where there are some teams that are just a little bit worse than them. We'll have to see what happens over the second half of the season. I will be here every week covering that. Right, one game to talk about in the FAWNL Plate Round 2. Maidenhead United against Haywards Heath Town. Now this one was supposed to be played at Maidenhead and got swapped in order to get the game on because of a really bad pitch at Maidenhead. So Maidenhead, they went a goal up through Walters in the 11th minute. Maidenhead haven't got their team lineup on full time yet. So Walters in the 11th minute put Maidenhead in front. Haywards Heath Town then in the 34th and the 38th minute, but we don't know the goal scorers, made it 2-1 to Haywards Heath. But then Maidenhead in the second half, Stockton in the 46th minute, Thompson in the 68th and O'Brien in the 84th made it 4-2 to Maidenhead. They go through and have a home quarter-final against Cambridge United in the FAWNL Plate. That tie being played in January along with the rest of the quarter-finals. So that is all what I'll call the league stuff and that, unlike the interleague competitions. Let's now get through to what we've all been waiting for, really, the third round of the FA Cup. No real shocks in this one, but some very strong efforts from the FAWNL side. So you'll remember I said last week that none of the championship sides had drawn each other. They pretty much all drawn FAWNL sides apart from Blackburn Rovers who drew 5th tier Darwin. But it was always going to be difficult for the FAWNL sides to get a good number of them through into the fourth round where the Super League sides come in. But a 3-2 defeat for Rugby Borough against Sheffield United, but that one after extra time. So strong and such a good effort from Rugby Borough in this one to really give Sheffield United a good run for their money. As I say, 1-1 at half time, and Rugby Borough in the 55th minute. So goals in this one: Angelina Nixon in the 17th minute, then Lily Greenslade in the 55th minute with the goals for Rugby. But Sheffield United right towards the end from memory at extra time. Means that it's the Championship side that goes through. Newcastle United beating Stoke City by 5-0. I remember looking this one up on the FA website pretty much at full time and was a bit surprised to see that it said Newcastle won 17-0. Thought that can't possibly be right and went on Twitter, and what a surprise, no it wasn't. Goals for Newcastle in this one: Bridget Galloway in the 22nd minute and the 53rd minute, Katie Barker in the 65th and Anna Soulsby in the 83rd minute, twice according to full time. So 5-0 Newcastle through. Burnley beating Camden Court 11-0, but there's no information on full time about that yet. Chester Street Town 1, Derby County 5. Derby County getting themselves ahead very early on in this one. In fact, it was 5-0 at half time. They scored in the 5th minute through Yasmin Mosby and the 7th minute through Rebecca May. So 2-0 up before you even get to 10 minutes, and a big mountain to climb for Chester Street Town. Amy Sims then popped up in the 27th and the 34th minute, and then Mosby again in the 39th minute. So 5-0 by half time, and Derby comfortable in the end. Yes, Chester Street scored a consolation goal in the second half, but comfortable for Derby in the end. Durham Sestra losing by 7-0 to Sunderland. That one, obviously Sunderland of the Championship, getting the better of 4th tier Durham Sestra. MK Dons 0, Birmingham City 0. This was the game we were following with such interest. It was the late kickoff with a 3 o'clock start, and MK Dons doing really well, held Birmingham all the way through into added time at the end of the 90 minutes before Birmingham popped up twice to score and defeat MK Dons. But such a good battle from Milton Keynes. Darwin as well, very respectable. Obviously Darwin not in the FAWNL, so not a game we're really following, but 2nd tier Blackburn Rovers away at 5th tier Darwin, only winning by 4-0. So Darwin should be very proud of themselves for that one. The pitch probably playing a part in that, and if we're honest, probably not a full strength Blackburn Rovers side either, but fair play to Darwin with that one. Nottingham Forest 3, Bournemouth St Michael's 1. Forest taking the lead very early in this one. Natalie Johnson in the 3rd minute had put Forest in front. Jade Formerston with a goal back for Bournemouth St Michael's before May Moncaster in the 42nd minute and Loanne Worsey in the 45th minute mean Forest go through into the 4th round. West Bromwich Albion 0, Durham 5. Durham, the championship Durham, not to be confused, of course, with Durham Sestra. So no goals for West Brom in that one. And Hull City against Wolverhampton Wanderers postponed. So that one is being played this weekend now. The postponed games being played this weekend. And hopefully they will all get on and we will get through the third round of the FA Cup before Christmas, and we don't have to have hopefully a couple of straggling games in the first weekend after January, because not only does it disrupt the FA Cup, it also disrupts the league badly. Right, second page, this is the southern half of the FA Cup draw. Crystal Palace beating Chatham Town by 6 goals to 0. So relatively comfortable again for the championship side. And Southampton women losing to Watford by 6 goals to 1. But there's no information from Southampton women about their goal scorer on that one. London City Lionesses beating Billericay Town by 6 goals to 0 as well. Reading beating Cheltenham Town 4 goals to 0. Plenty of shutouts from the championship sides here. Luton against Keynsham Town, that game is postponed. Portsmouth 1, Southampton 2. That huge derby on the south coast. It's Southampton that come away with the victory. Emma Jones with the only goal for Portsmouth. 36th minute that goal went in, Southampton getting their winner at some point through the second half, but obviously being a championship side it's not on full time. Plymouth Argyle 2, Oxford United 2, needing a penalty shootout, which Plymouth win by 5 goals to 3. Goals in this one then, it was a goal for Oxford in the first half, 1-0 up at half time were Oxford. The 45th plus 1 minute for Lacey J. Liggett for Oxford. And then Plymouth equalising before half time, 45 plus 3, Plymouth managed to equalise. Oxford then with an unrecorded goal in the second half on this, but it looked for all the world as though they were going to take the victory, but weren't able to do so because of a goal to Fern Orchard in the 94th minute to equalise for Plymouth Argyle. And then, as I say, Plymouth winning by 5 goals to 3 in the penalty shootout. It's a bit of a weird one on full time, the way it's been recorded, because it says that it was 2-2. And then, unless the other goal was in extra time, I'll have to double check that myself, because it says Oxford took the lead in the 45 plus 1. Then it says Plymouth equalised 45 plus 3. And then Plymouth scored 90 plus 4. So if it finished 2-2, then then there wouldn't be, as recorded, a goal in extra time to Imogen Crawford. Not entirely sure what's happened there, and this is the joys of working with full time and yeah. So anyway, Plymouth 2, Oxford 2, Plymouth winning 5-3 in a penalty shootout. Ipswich Town against Lewes was postponed. The Moneyfields beating Millwall Lionesses by a goal to 0. 37th minute goal in this one to Kahuna Heya-Taylor. And that was the only goal of the game for Moneyfields, but it was enough to put them into the 4th round and get a great tie for them as well. And AFC Bournemouth 0, Charlton Athletic 6. So if we just do have a very quick look at the draw for the 4th round, it's not been, in my opinion, the best draw it could have been from an FAWNL point of view. The best draw is arguably the Plymouth against Forest tie from an FAWNL point of view, because that is the only tie that guarantees an FAWNL club in the 5th round. Is that Plymouth against Forest. Very long trip for Forest. I suspect they'll probably go down the night before, seeing as it's a 1 o'clock start and a 5-hour journey. But that's my assumption. Other ties involving the FAWNL sides then. Burnley host Birmingham City of the Championship. They might fancy themselves. MK Dons, of course, did push Burnley all the way. Derby County get to host Super League side Leicester, which is probably it's a great derby for them and a great opportunity to test themselves against a Super League side. But again, Leicester, not one of the Man U, Man City, Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, not one of the big Super League sides. Moneyfields away at London City Lionesses. That'll be a great day for Moneyfields. Wish them all the best in that one. Manchester United hosting Newcastle. Newcastle, of course, they have Super League ambitions. They've gone fully pro. They're going for it. And if it was the other way around and hosted at Newcastle, you'd say this was great and you could get a huge number of people into St James's Park. But being away at Manchester United just takes a little bit of the shine off it, in my opinion. And those are the 5 ties that are guaranteed. So then we go Ipswich against Lewis. They've got to play this weekend, of course. So we'll have to see if Ipswich can get through that before you have a look at their 4th round tie. Luton Town against Keynsham. Great opportunity for Keynsham here if they can get past Luton, because they then get to host Super League side Brighton in that one. So that would be a great occasion for them. And Hull City against West Bromwich Albion. Hull City against Wolves. Hull City against Wolves, and the winner of that tie has to travel to Reading, which is another tie, particularly if Wolves win that they might fancy themselves for a little bit of an upset. And just to round this off, Ipswich against Lewis, the winner of that will host Charlton Athletic. So the only all FAWNL tie, and there go the only guaranteed FAWNL side in the 5th round of the FA Cup will be either Plymouth or Forest. Out of both sides, of course, in their respective Premier divisions in the South and the North. But that's not to say that they will necessarily be the only one. I think looking at it, I think Burnley may fancy themselves against Birmingham City. Wolves, if they can get past Hull, I think will fancy themselves again against Reading. So I think there are opportunities for more than one FAWNL side to come in. As long-term viewers of this show will know, I cover the FA Cup as long as there is an FAWNL side in it. As soon as all the FAWNL sides are knocked out, then I don't follow the FA Cup anymore. Principally because, as well, by the time all the FAWNL sides are knocked out, it's normally, it's guaranteed to be the quarterfinals at minimum now, and then mainstream media who don't really even know who half of these teams are start to pick the FA Cup up. So that's kind of how we run with that. A comment on the FA Cup draw, by the way, for the 4th round. I found it much better than the 3rd round. I think, as I said last week, hopefully they've learned from the 3rd round and some of what we thought from the 3rd round and change it for the 4th. And they absolutely did. Didn't try to do graphics while they were going. They just did the draw and kept it up at a decent pace, which was exactly what we needed them to do. So yeah, that's the 4th round. Those ties are to be played on the 14th of January. So we'll be covering that obviously in the new year. Right. Let's finish off this week's show then with the final lot of fixtures for 2023 into the Northern Premier Division. Tonight, Huddersfield Town, bottom of the league, host Nottingham Forest in 3rd. So this is Nottingham Forest. They really do need to win this game, get themselves within 4 points of the top, and keep the pressure on the top 2. But that will then mean that they've played significantly more. They'll have played 1 game more than Burnley and 2 more than Wolves. They won't have played more than Newcastle, though, because Newcastle against Fylde, the other side in the relegation zone, at the weekend. Other games at the weekend: Derby County against West Brom is 7th against 10th, and Stourbridge then take on Huddersfield, which is 9th against 12th. Stourbridge, if they can get themselves that victory, would lift them to 9 points clear of the relegation zone. And then that just makes that even worse for those bottom sides. Both of those sides, if you give it my opinion, and I've already put my predictions into Prediction League and I'm not doing very well in it, so maybe don't listen to me. Huddersfield, 2 games this week. Can't really see them getting anything from either. They might get a draw with Stourbridge, but I do think they'll lose to Forest. Fylde will lose to Newcastle, I'm pretty sure. So then you've got both of those sides in the bottom 2 will have played 11 games out of the 22, and they will be just on 3 points and still in the relegation zone. If West Brom could get a point from Derby, or maybe even beat Derby, Stourbridge I think will get all 3 against Huddersfield. Then Huddersfield might get a point out of them. But then if Stourbridge lift themselves away and up to 12th, and you've got a 9-point gap, Halifax will still be 6 points clear, but they've got lots of games in hand. And then it's only West Brom, and you're looking at it and you're going, is it starting to look like 2 teams from 3, not even 4 or 5? Is it 2 from 3 that are going to go down? We'll see what happens next week with regards to that. Just going to jump in here before we carry on the rest of the show. Between the recording of this show and it going out at 6 o'clock tonight, it has been announced that the game tonight between Huddersfield Town and Nottingham Forest has been postponed. So do not travel if you were intending on going to that game, because it is now off. On with the show. Southern Premier Division, just 3 games, including one particularly big one. Oxford United against Billericay Town. Those games there, Oxford in 7th, Billericay in 8th. Neither really in too much danger immediately anyway of being dragged into a relegation fight. Billericay would happily take a point, just move themselves even further away. They're 6 away at the moment, but with a better goal difference, it's kind of 7. And you look at Chatham and London Bees. Chatham have already played 11 games. London Bees, they've played 10, but they've only got 1 draw all season. So Billericay Town, getting something out of this game, making it a free game gap. You start to think that they've probably done enough. Oxford United in 7th, obviously not had the best of seasons. They are 14 points away from the top of the table. Plymouth against Cardiff, big game towards the bottom here. 9th against 10th. Neither of the bottom 2 have games, but 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th are all playing each other. Cardiff with a win would move themselves 5 points away from the relegation zone and really would open that gap up, because Plymouth are already 5 points away. Plymouth, on the other hand, with a win, and it is at Plymouth, would move themselves to 12 points. That'd be 8 points away. So then you're at a free game gap there between Plymouth and the bottom, and again you're then starting to look at, as I've said in the north, do you take it down then, and do you go, well, you're looking then at 2 going down from 3 with the 2 in the relegation zone and Cardiff in that, or if Cardiff get the victory, it's a 5-point gap, and Cardiff and Plymouth will still have a game in hand over Chatham, and you're looking at, okay, maybe is it 2 from 2? And then at the top, hashtag against Rugby. Huge opportunity for Rugby to put further pain to hashtag around this Christmas period. Obviously after Cheltenham beat them a couple of weeks ago. If Rugby Borough can get the victory against hashtag of course beat them earlier on in the season, but if Rugby can get the victory this time around, then hashtag would still be behind Portsmouth on goal difference and many goals as well. But they would then have played 2 games more than Portsmouth, and Rugby will be breathing down their neck with a game in hand and only 3 points behind them, plus the goal difference would balance itself out. So it's a very important game for Rugby. I think if Rugby lose it, then they are 9 points away from the top of the table. It starts to look like a bit of a tall order, because they will have dropped 12 points so far this season, and that tends to be all you're able to drop. But Portsmouth and hashtag do seem locked in this battle. Portsmouth not playing this weekend, so hashtag really do need to win. Even a point would arguably be not good enough with Portsmouth having 2 games in hand on them. So hashtag, it's a lot of pressure on this game right before Christmas for hashtag United. Division 1 Midlands then. 3 games in Division 1 Midlands. Bournemouth St Michael's against Loughborough Lightning. This is first against third. 7 points the gap between the sides there. So Bournemouth St Michael's, if they can close that gap down to 4, it will just start to pressure Loughborough ever so slightly. Leaford Athletic against Northampton Town, 11th against 6th in that one. Leaford Athletic with games in hand, with a game in hand over Notts County and Leek Town. This is that game in hand. If Leaford Athletic were able to get a victory against Northampton Town, it would move them up 2 places and out of the relegation zone. So a lot riding on the game for Leaford Athletic. Sheffield in 12th against Sutton Coldfield Town in 7th. Sheffield can't get themselves out of the relegation zone, but they've got 2 games in hand over Notts County and Leek Town, and a win against Sutton Coldfield Town would move them just 1 point away from safety with another game in hand. So very important weekend towards the bottom of Division 1 Midlands. Division 1 North, there are 4 games scheduled to take place. Chester Street Town against Doncaster Rovers Bells is 11th against 8th. Chester Street Town with a decent victory. I think 3-goal victory would lift themselves out the relegation zone, but any win for Chester Street Town, particularly with game in hand over Norton Stockton Ancients after this weekend, would see them in a much better position than they are now. Chorley against Middlesbrough, 7th against 3rd. Middlesbrough still with ambitions, of course, of getting promoted this season. They're only 4 points off the top of the table. Hull City not playing this weekend, so they will then have played a game more than Hull, but the pressure will be on being only 1 point behind. FC United of Manchester, bottom of the table in 12th against Barnsley, who are in 2nd. Barnsley with a game in hand over Hull. That is this weekend. Level on points. You would expect they will probably go back to the top of the table. And York City against Stockport County, 9th against 4th. York City just looking for a point would make it a 2-game gap to the bottom 2. Division 1 South East, then Cambridge City against London Seaward. Cambridge City in 11th, London Seaward in 7th. But there is just 1 point separating 9th from 11th at the moment. So still to play for in Division 1 South East. Cambridge United against Worthing is 5th against 4th. So both sides still having ambitions of challenging towards the top. But one of them at least will drop points this weekend. Haywards Heath Town against Actonians. That is 12th against 8th. Haywards Heath Town, though, with a win could lift themselves out of the relegation zone. That's how tight it is at Division 1 South East. And Norwich City, this is their game in hand over AFC Wimbledon. They are hosting Chesham United. They are unlikely to go top because AFC Wimbledon's goal difference is 9 better. I don't think Chesham are going to lose by 10 goals, but they could get themselves level on points as they both hit the halfway point of their season. And 3 games in Division 1 Southwest. Abingdon United against Exeter City is 5th against 2nd. Exeter, of course, this is their game in hand over AFC Bournemouth, and they are still perfect, as are Bournemouth this season. Maidenhead United against Moneyfields, that is 8th against 4th. I think any other point of the season where teams have been dropping points, Moneyfields would be right in there, particularly with 2 games in hand over Swindon and 1 over AFC Bournemouth. But as it stands, they are 11 points off the top of the table, purely because Bournemouth and Exeter have just been so good so far this season. You look at all the other leagues where Portsmouth, I think, have only dropped 3 points from memory, haven't they? But anywhere between 3 and 6 points have kind of been dropped so far this season. And if that was to happen in Division 1 Southwest, then Moneyfields would be right in there. But Bournemouth and Exeter have just been so good. But Moneyfields, they've got to keep on going, because if they do start to drop points, Bournemouth and Exeter, and don't forget they've still got to play each other twice, because the top of the table clash that we were all hoping for last weekend, a couple of weekends ago, got called off. So they will drop points at some point, and then these teams, Swindon, Moneyfields, Abingdon, can really pounce. And Chelsea against Portishead Town, the bottom two coming up against each other at Chelsea. Now, if this game goes the way of Portishead, they lift themselves up to 9th and are out of the relegation zone. If it goes the way of Chelsea, then nothing changes. But probably the best opportunity of the season for Chelsea to get themselves some points and really try to get their season going. So we'll see next week if this game goes ahead, because Chelsea have had quite a few home games called off. But if the game goes ahead, then we'll be watching that with a lot of interest on Sunday afternoon to see if Chelsea can get something to get their season started. But that kind of covers everything coming up this weekend. As I said, there's those 3 FA Cup games: Ipswich against Lewes, Luton against Keynsham Town, and Hull against Wolves. So those games are happening this weekend, and hopefully we'll get the 3rd round completed before Christmas. And then it doesn't seem to have been too bad this year, the postponements and the pushing of everything back. I seem to recall last year, we had County Cup games postponed, and it just pushed everything back and back and back and back. And that doesn't seem to have happened so far this year. I think quite a few counties have changed how they've done their County Cup. So either FAWNL sides are in kind of their own competition, kind of tiers 3, 4 and 5, and then tiers 6 and 7 are like have got their own different competition, so you don't get these 20-0s and everything. Or they've changed it like the Norfolk one, where Norwich don't come in until the quarterfinals. So it's done a little bit like the FA Cup, where teams higher up in the divisions come in later. And I think that's a really good way of doing it. Or you could be like the Nottinghamshire FA and just ban FAWNL sides, which I know very much annoyed Notts County this season because they got promoted and then weren't able to play in the County Cup. So that doesn't seem to have had as much of an impact this season as it did last season, but the whiteboard is still proving to be invaluable. So next week's show obviously will be quite short because there's no fixtures to look at. So we're going to go through the league results from this weekend, however many there are, and then that will pretty much cover us for 2023. I've got a couple of bits planned for over Christmas just to keep things ticking over. So that is kind of the plan here. Is we'll have the games on Sunday, then we'll see what happens with those, quickly go through them next week, and then it will be the Christmas break and we'll be right back in it for the second half of the season, which should come a bit more kind of thick and fast really, because as I said, it could well be only one FAWNL sides in the FA Cup by the middle of January. The Cup and Plate competitions are obviously already down to the quarterfinals, so there's not going to be teams missing because of that. It should just be plenty of league games. So we look forward to that in the second half of the season. As you've seen from the league tables over the course of this show as well, there is everything still to play for. So I hope you can join me next week and then into 2024. Instead, we'll be back next Thursday at 6 PM bringing you the very latest from the FAWNL. But for now, goodbye.